Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar Wednesday from GE Additive. My name is Mike Cloran, and I'll be the moderator for today's session, which is on best practices, environment, health, and safety for additive manufacturing. Before we begin, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. If you'll take a look at your screen, you'll see multiple engagement tools. These are tools you can use, and they're all resizable and movable. So feel free to move them around and get the most out of your desktop space. You also have the option to expand the slides or maximize them to full screen, and you can do this by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner. I also want to point out that we have a variety of support materials that are available in the resource list, and I encourage you to download any resources that you might find helpful. And that's it. So now that we've gone through how to make the most out of your viewing experience, let's meet our presenter. Today we have Willie Feichter, who is Senior Manager for Environment, Health, and Safety at GE Additive, and he'll be joining us soon to talk about additive EHS practices. So if you have any questions for Willie during today's webinar, you can use the Q&A section located on the right-hand side of your screen. At the end of the webinar, we'll try to answer as many questions as we can, time permitting. And that's it for me. Let's get started. Willie, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Mike, for the nice introduction. First of all, I want to give you also a little bit background about myself. By training, I'm an electrical engineer and have various degrees there. I joined GE 17 years ago, mainly in the engineering field, but I switched a couple of years ago to the EHS field. And since 2018, I am the EHS Senior Manager for GE Additive in Germany. So a little bit about the agenda for today. I want to talk to you about understanding your IMP, and I will also explain to you later what IMP means. Also, I want to give you a quick hint about machine environment and potential AM process impacts when it comes to health and safety and environmental implication. Then we go a little bit deeper into the environmental topics that need to be considered when you're operating additive manufacturing machines. And also, at the end, very largely occupational health and safety things that also need to be considered. So IMP, what is IMP? And also, as I explained, I will tell you in a second. First of all, let's understand a little bit about the environment where we're working in. It's additive manufacturing, and it's a very brand new technology, not at all anymore, but widely still developing in many fields. And you see a variety of applications that you maybe already have in your operations or where you're already knowing about it. So healthcare is a big part of it. So you can really print anything that is resourceable and needable when it comes to medical treatment, etc. The energy field, you see here one component that we use in our gas turbines. And this allows us, the printing, 3D printing techniques allows us really to print things that make our machines more efficient and more workable. The aerospace is a widely applicable area for additive manufacturing. It allows us also there to manufacture things in a way and in a complexity that we have not imagined a century ago. And also in the space of automotive. So there are a couple of examples where you can do very exciting things like new designs for wheels, or do something very efficiently like cooling systems that are maybe required to gain more efficiency out of your equipment. First of all, also understand what different areas or opportunities do you have for additive manufacturing. I think the oldest one are pretty much the polymer and plastic fields. So about fused deposit modeling, it's now around century or more, or you're just printing stuff, or you have also stereolithography, which is also widely used and a very wide range of applications out there, and it's still very efficiently. But then it comes really to printing, let's say, more challenging materials like metals. And there are techniques around of that where you're either using a laser system or you're using an EBM, an electron beam system. And the last, and I think more or less the newest thing is about binder jetting, where you can really print polymers, metals, and ceramics with, let's say, inkjet printing technology, and then getting baked out in a way that you get very unique and very interesting parts out of it. You see here really also a little bit the history from large scale, small equipment like the robobot, the MakerBot printing system, now moving into areas or printing sizes that are nearby as large as a living person, as an example. Also in the field of laser bed printing, you see there the opportunity to go from very small printing sizes to very large areas there. Important is here to understand by maximizing the sizes, you're also changing the risk parameters. So if you're already operating a small system and you think about making it larger or more industrialized, maybe also risk potential may change that. And as I said, when it comes to that, you need to know your IMP. And when we talk about IMP, we talk about infrastructure, the material, and the process. So therefore, when you want to build something, you always start with the material. You want something made out of metal, of Inconel, or of plastic, or whatever. So therefore, you're looking usually for the right process, how to do it, either as a traditional approach, or you use additive manufacturing. But when that's in mind, you also come back, what infrastructure do you need to operate and run such processes and machines with that specific material? Now going in the field of machine environment and the process itself. As already said, there are a variety of processes here, and I want to explain 3 of them. One is the direct metal laser melting, where you typically have a laser source with an optical system, which is called scanner, and that allows you to apply a focused laser beam on a build platform that is covered with a coating system with metal powder. And with applying these metal powder in surface, in layers, you're building up a 3D structure. And when you're lowering the build platform, you're getting that. What you already see there, you have already the first hazards. So you're operating lasers. And to melt metal, you need a lot of power to do that. So you have to consider that operation of a laser equipment is already a hazard itself, and they need to understand it. Second technology here on this slide is the electron beam melting, which is from the process quite similar, but instead of using an optical system and a laser, we're utilizing here an electronic system. So you're creating an electron beam, a very high energized electron beam that then hits the surface and creates also there enough energy and power to allow to build up the structure. The risk there is one side, the electron beam itself, it's very powerful, but when it hits the surface, it generates a leakage radiation. It's more a kind of X-ray radiation, and you need to consider that when you operate this kind of machines. Third technology, what I want to introduce here from the hazard point of view, is binder jetting. Also, that is an interesting way how to do it. So you also have there a powder bed where you build up and leveling layers of material that you want to print. As I already said, it can be metals, it can be ceramics. But instead of melting it or heating it up with an electron beam or a laser, utilizing a printer system, like as you maybe have with your inkjet printing system at home, a little bit more sophisticated. What you apply here is more or less a resin that then glues together all the particles there. This resin needs solvents so that you can transport it. The solvents can be either water-based, which is not from a very high concern, but it can also be based on a flammable, ignitable substance. And you need a lot of that. Secondly, the process itself, it's fine, but you then take it out, and then you need to cure it. You need to put it in an oven and to shrink it in a way. Also, that process maybe can generate additional hazards like fumes or volatile organic compounds. So you need to understand it a little bit. And then all around, so not only printing, it's also taking the material out of your printer and do something with that. Either you anyhow have to remove it from a build plate if you do laser printing or electron printing. So therefore you have some kind of post-processing with cutting, grinding, polishing, etc. But also before you operate it, before you build it, you have to set up your systems, you have to fill it, you have to put powder there, you have to maintain it in a way. And that also creates an environment of potential risks and hazards. They are either routine, because when you're utilizing a printer, you want to utilizing it very frequently and often. So this printing activity would be something routine. But then some maintenance activities may vary. That can occur when changing, as an example, electron coils in the EBM systems after 400, 800, or 1,200 operation hours. So these are non-frequent, non-routine tasks that also need to be considered in your overall environment. Yeah, one point is also know your material, and I tell you, you should know it very well. When it comes to specific hazards aligned with materials, you should understand what hazard properties can be there. And I put up here one typical material. It's titanium. It's very widely used in metal printing applications. And you see here that what is important is understanding a little bit also the size range of your powder. The typical application for lasers would be that the size, powder size, the grain sizes would be around 15 to 45, typically around 30 microns, okay? And in that situation, powder itself became a flammable substance, and you have to consider it. And it also has some combustibility characteristics that you need to consider when you work with these materials. When you're a little bit more relaxed and using EBM systems, they allow you to utilizing larger particles. And since that particles are larger, the physical and chemical properties change. And therefore, from flammable substance, what it was before for laser application, it become a non-flammable application and a little bit more relaxed from an EHS point of view when it comes to combustibility and flammability. What you also need to consider, and titanium is a little bit boring, and the point is also the toxicity. So if you have Inconel as an example, or cobalt chromium substances, the components there and the materials of the alloys itself can be also classified as toxic or harmful, at least. So when it comes to operating and utilizing these substances, you have to consider that as well. So what it can do from the infrastructure point of view, what are the best questions that you should ask yourself when you operate in additive manufacturing machines? First of all, is a little bit understanding the storage and use limits that you maybe have with the materials that you want to print. Okay, so it can be that 1 kilogram or 1 pound of a specific powder, even if it's reactive or flammable, is under a specific jurisdiction okay to store. But when you do it more in industrial grade, it can be that you're using more than 1 pound, you maybe have 200, 300, 400 pounds there. And then can it be the case that you run into a situation where you maybe need permits or at least a suitable storage facility. Also, therefore, understanding how the material then is classified under your local jurisdictions. Okay. Fire protection is an issue, and I tell you, water is not always your friend. Specifically when you're utilizing materials that may react with water and generate hydrogen, as aluminum or titanium powders do. Under these situations, it could be not a good idea if you operate it in a fully sprinklered environment, because in a case of an emergency, you're creating a larger hazard by adding water to it and generating hydrogen rather than leave it and let it burning down. The powder handling itself is also interesting. Can be that where you operate and where you store it, that it can be classified as an explosive area under the US system as a class 2, a division 1 or 2, depends on larger amounts and the areas where you are, or in Europe under the ATEX standards as well. If you work with these materials like sieving, grinding, cutting, whatever, then also understand that you maybe need some local exhaust and extraction systems that needs to be also graded according to the ATEX standards or the class division standards as well. Operating electron beam machines, as I already said, they can generate or they generate X-rays. So there are specific clearance levels when you put these machines there, either protecting other electronic components or even from the occupational health and safety perspective. Also, these parts that you can print there, as I said, it can be very small printers, can be also very large printers, and they are really on the build plate and can be very heavy. So therefore, you should understand, just from the ergonomic point of view, how to move these pieces around and how to get them out of your machine and back into the machine. Also, the machine environment maybe requires some temperature and humidity limits, so therefore you should counsel your manufacturer of the equipment. And it could be also an idea or requirement that the machine environment is a clean room or needs to meet clean room standards, specifically when you go to smaller powder grains sizes or you have specific applications with very high toxic substances. Let's move into environmental topics. So what are things that you need to consider from, let's say, a regulatory point of view? First of all, air permitting can be an issue. So if you need to extract fumes, dust, etc., you need to understand if there are specific thresholds, limits to have these exhausted, build up, and operated. Also, when you're operating, as example, with binder jet technology, you need to cure the material. There can be some volatile organic compound creation around of that maybe triggers thresholds for exhaust systems. There are specific federal or regional regulations around how to do that. In this situation, I recommend to you to counsel a local specialist or your regulator to help you with that. Also, from the water permitting point of view, it's important to understand that you have cooling systems there. What does it mean to you? Is it non-contact cooling water? Can you just dispose it or needs it to be recycled? Or are there any cleaning baths for your materials or for your build shops that maybe have some toxic or environmental pollutant residues in there that you need to treat? The last point here, and a really large one, is really the whole waste management. And there's a broad range of waste that's generated during the whole process, from the material itself, from the process, from the cleaning, etc. Some of the stuff can be potential hazardous, so you need to treat it according to the local regulations as hazardous materials and hazardous waste. And also, it's additive material manufacturing, so it allows you also to have flexibility there. So you can print one day one little piece, and the next day you can print it larger, and then you print it in a series, etc. This may impact your waste streams, and sometimes your waste vendors are not able to pick up more waste when you generate more. So we need to understand that from that point of view. So what types of waste are generated typically of that? Yeah, three, let's say, two main parts of that, and also the challenges around of that. It's solids and liquids, more or less. Solids when it really comes for all the cleaning activities like wipes and cleaning material, etc., toolings, etc. But it can be also the powders itself, so can really reuse a lot of the powders, but sometimes if the grain size becomes too large, it's not suitable anymore, so you need to dispose it. Therefore, you need to understand if it has some toxicity or reactivity there itself. The liquids itself, it's more around topics when it comes to passivation and cleaning of the either machine or of changing the filter systems inside there. There can be a generation of sludge and a mixture of process condensate and residues, and also powders that need to be classified. And therefore, it can be a large challenge to handle these unique waste streams there in a proper way. Furthermore, it's also you need to understand that a lot of information is typically given you by a manufacturer of the printer. So we tell you where you maybe need to clean. We tell you how to clean. We also tell you what type of waste is generated in a way that you can understand it and at least pick it up from there and work with your local professionals and regulators to get it disposed. Other challenge is since the technology is, let's say, pretty new, there's not much, let's say, experience around of it when it comes really to waste treatment, but also to recycle, etc. There are a lot of good initiatives out there in the industry, a lot of things moving on because this is very key and important to us. But nevertheless, at the moment, when you go to your local waste vendor and they never have something to do with additive manufacturing, it's very high likely that he's a little bit overwhelmed with that. So when it comes to your powders and also to at all metal additive manufacturing, what specific challenges do we have there in addition to that, what I've already told you? It's really about the used metal powders. can be that, as I already said, when you reuse it and you sieve it, you come to a point where you don't have the specific criteria anymore, or even your application don't allow you to reuse the powder. As an example, if you're printing equipment for aerospace applications, etc. There are some consideration and some jurisdictions that tell you that this is not scrap metal, okay? So it's maybe a toxic or hazardous waste stream. So you need to understand that. A good way how to handle that most of the time is really print as much as you can into a solid form, and then it's usually not a bigger issue. The other thing is about sludge that comes from passivation and filter cleaning, etc. This is a wild mix of process condensate, powders, etc. They can be hazardous, but not maybe have to. So therefore, it's also very wise to understand if it's toxic or is it hazardous or not, and really analyze it. This can save you a lot of headaches and also a lot of dollars when you do so. Also, the filters itself, they can contain condensate, but not necessarily some of the stuff can be perceived as ignitable or toxic or hazardous. So also there to analyze it and understand it can allow you to either recycle or reuse the filters in a proper way. When you take it from the waste categorization, I just picked up two main jurisdictions here. On the left-hand side, you see the US waste jurisdiction about how to classify waste based on Federal Code of Regulations. And when it comes to the additive manufacturing waste, most of the time you find the 𝗬𝗎 and 𝗬𝗎3, so ignitable and reactivity there as a potential way how it can be classified. On the European side, and it's a good example here, waste is completely perceived differently. Rather than understanding what is the behavior of the material that you want to, or the characteristics of the material that you want to dispose, the European system is based on what industry is generating that. And therefore also here you need professional support to understand if that material is correctly classified as the right waste material, so that it can be treated and handled all the way along with that. Also here, contact a waste vendor or a specialist how to do that. I really recommend that. It helps a lot and it gives you the confidence that waste streams handled properly. When it comes also how to generate the tray, some of this waste, we need to talk about filter treatment. And specifically, during some operation, the maintenance requirements are always there that you treat your filters very well, because the purpose of these is really to clean up the exhaust streams of the whole process and make sure that what we ventilate out of there is not really harmful or damaging or something like that. Nevertheless, there are various technologies how to do it, either wet or dry. I don't want to debate on that. But when it comes to the filters and you need to exchange it, you typically have to try to passivate them. That means all the residuants, the condensate, the powder which is inside of the filter, etc. You want to make sure that when you exchange the filter and it comes in contact with oxygen, or maybe when you want to dispose it at all, that it doesn't start igniting. So therefore, you try to passivate it. Either you put it into water, which is a very good and solid way how to do it, or you put it in the hydrogen carbonate, which is caulk, which is also a way. It's not a chemical passivation, but it's a way also to contain the risk there of ignition. So therefore, why you're doing that, pretty much really to remove one of these hazardous characteristics for your waste. So when you do that, as an example, you can get rid of the 𝗬𝗎 and 𝗬𝗎3, or even if from the European Waste Catalog classification, that makes it easier for you, and it makes it also easier for your waste treatment facility, because then they maybe can take the filter apart and recycle it. So scrap metals, filter material, etc. But there are challenges around of that. So specifically when you work with aluminum, stuff is very reactivity, and also the process condensate can be very reactive. So it can also take a couple of hours, maybe also some days until the whole passivation system stopped and you do not generate any further hydrogen, and all the aluminum particles are there transferred into something which is called aluminum oxide, which is a very solid and which is a very stable system. Also, it can be that under some specific restriction in the US, also in Europe, that you're not allowed to treat it on site, because then you are considered as a waste treatment site. So you also need to understand what you're allowed to do from the regulatory perspective to operate these machines and also treat the filters properly. Here's some examples on how you can do that and where you get support on that. So as I already said, we perceive that water treatment for the filters is a very good way to do it. And therefore, we find in the user manual of the GE equipment very largely and very detailed information and instruction how to do that. One thing take away is really do it as exactly as it is in a user manual. Okay. Why I'm telling you that, yeah, sure, you can try to figure out if there's some ways to make something a little bit more efficient, and then you shortcut there. And then why you should hook up here with your grounding strip. You can do it also without that. All these steps mentioned in the manual are really around treating the filter and the maintenance there in a way that it is safe and risk-free for you as good as possible. Everything else beyond of that, we are out of the comfort zone, and it can be that either the filter passivation doesn't work very well, or in the worst case, your filters start getting reactive and you have something that starts burning inside your facility, and this should not be the case. It's a very inconvenient situation. Also here, say a good best example how we do it in GE. When it comes really for this all filter passivation, we take them out of our wet filters, we clean them, we put the sludge into drums, and then we skim the water from these drums and have the sludge in specific waste containers that we can dispose. Anything what we do is, you see already some of our colleagues there in the fall protection and also in a ventilated area so that we can make sure that we do not generate any type of specific hazard or reactivity here. Some takeaways from that point. As already said, it's always a good idea when it comes to waste to consult your local regulators and experts that help you really to understand what restrictions may apply and what opportunities do you have to dispose and treat waste at your site. Start early with the discussion, especially with your waste vendors. As I said, some of them are not really equipped, but a lot of them, they operate in kind of networks or already have partner companies that maybe already have experience with this type of material and waste streams. So this will allow them and you to set up the right processes around treating your waste. Know what you have, okay, and know the rules that you have. Note them down frequently. Check if there are any regulatory updates and changes there. In the waste area it can be, and it's a very highly regulated area. Can be also considered as a takeaway that it is a really strategic point. It's really also a key changer for your business. If something goes wrong with waste, it usually is very highlighted amongst regulators and also the public. So therefore, it's nothing where we want to be in the newspapers. Waste regulations can be complicated, not only in Germany, all across the globe. Every country and even inside of a country, federal, states, governments, local regulators have different requirements. Also in Germany, as an example, when it comes to water, every country has a different regulation here, what you can dispose as water and what's not. So therefore, if you need help, don't be shy to ask for help here. Yeah, moving into the next section. Here, I want to really go on some of the topics very quickly, and then on some of the topics I will go a little bit in detail. First of all, from the occupational health and safety, when it comes to the powders, what risks you may have facing for. First of all, some of the powders, as already said, can be harmful. That means their chemical properties are creating hazards for health of people that get exposed to it, either by inhaling it or even skin contact or eating it by accidentally. The other part, which is quite very important, is the reactivity of the powders. So are they able to create a combustible dust scenario or not? Are they explosive from that point of view? Some of the powders have environmental impacts. Nickel powders, as an example, can be very impactful for the environment because the nickel as a water harmful substance is treated in such a way. So therefore you need to understand that, and also understand that maybe products from wastewaters may not go into your public sewage system, as an example. And the byproduct itself of the laser printing, as an example, so the process condensate, sludge, dust, fumes, etc. They are a wild mix sometimes between the powders itself and some of the components that react with each other. When it comes to considering health and safety implications there, you should understand that based on the hazardness, there can be also chronic impact, especially when you work with cobalt or chromium materials. So if people get frequently exposed to that, they maybe build up some kind of a health reaction on that, and in the worst case, can be a cancer. But nevertheless, you need to understand that there are really hazards and risks around of that. Nickel, as an example, is very sensitizing on your skin. So you can develop a very quick allergy around of that. You're utilizing typically inert gases for the processes, nitrogen, as an example, or argon. So these gases are asphylaxing. That means they take away the oxygen out of it, and people don't have the opportunity to breathe if a room is filled up with that. Radiation risks, as an example, inside of the machine with a laser printer, you typically have a laser class 4, which is very high, a very strong laser. It can be very, very dangerous. At the outside of the machine, it's classified as 1, so it's absolutely safe. So understand, if you're opening the machine for whatever reason, you're opening up also your safety chain, and then you have maybe a class 4 environment. EBMs create an ionizing risk. It's X-rays that are generated, not much, but in some jurisdictions, you need to be aware that you maybe need a specific permit to operate the machine and have a radiation safety officer that's helping you with meeting the requirements. And there are non-routine tasks, as I said, changing the filters, etc., that you do from time to time. Things that we do frequently, we tend to do very good and very thoroughly, unless we try to figure out how to make this better, and then sometimes it ends up in something that's not working very well. But unfrequent things, not trained so often, may impose some risks. From the non-health side, the safety consideration should be really around all the combustible dusts there, and also the consequences that range out of that, like fires or explosives, then they can be created. And there are other hazards like confined space or even working from heights, or etc. It depends on if you need to go inside the machine and it's very tight, close, or if you need to go outside of a machine, then it maybe can also be a specific hazard and risk that needs to be considered. So what you do, from the occupational health and safety point of view, we have typically our hierarchy of controls, where we start always with trying to get rid of the hazard itself. So as an example, if I have combustible material, etc., if I can switch to another grain size, then I take the combustibility away, and then I was getting rid of the elimination. Substitution means that we try to replace one hazard with something which is a little less, but already a little bit different. Engineering controls is all around getting it done from the technical piece of point of view. So we try to get people away from the hazard and not getting exposed to it. Administrative controls really are the way how we work with machines, equipments, how the processes look like, where we bring together this equipment and also the humans. And the last one is protecting humans itself with utilizing personal protective equipment. And as already said, when you start at the very top of it, it has the most effectiveness. And at the end, PPE is the least effective way how to treat specific hazards and risks. What type of engineering controls you typically have, and that is pretty much what your equipment manufacturer is giving you. So they give you glove boxes that are interlocked. They are inertization of the process chambers and also of the glove boxes. They control the oxygen levels there, that you're not going into a situation to get a combustible atmosphere. They put filters up there to ensure that everything what's coming out of the process is treated and safe enough to get exposed or get exhausted into the environment. When we operate lasers, you see on our machines that we install active laser monitors that pretty much detect any laser disalignment and ensure that the laser stays where it is, and if it does not, it will switching off the whole machine. We give you machines that have closed loop systems. That means the powder stays within the machine all the time, where you can print, sieve, clean, etc. in one piece there. So nevertheless, it's anything what your manufacturer can give you is there, and it's intended to the specific utilization of the machine and of the equipment. From the fire protection piece, I'm strongly telling you that please take grounding and bounding very seriously, specifically when it comes to cleaning the machines, operating it, opening up. So we have in our machines everywhere grounding strips and points where you can hook up and do it. So also we typically recommend Esd Mats in front of your machine that are also connected to that. Make sure that any kind of static discharge is avoided. Important is also to do this with the auxiliary equipment like vacuum cleaners or wet separators. They have the grounding system and you need to hook them on so that the machine can be operated safely in that environment. So therefore you have to have also robust and good housekeeping. Get rid of the powder where it should not be around the machine. It should stay in your machine. And for the worst case, you should have firefighting equipment in place. So we typically say Class D fire extinguisher. I strongly recommend to you to take some time, take one of your Class D fire extinguishers and try it out. Go somewhere out there, and then you'll recognize very quickly that there's a very small amount of salt coming out of that, which is typically a Class D fire extinguisher. And then take a look at your machine and then assess the right amount of fire extinguishers that you need if you have the situation to get a fire under control in your equipment. As I already said, it's quite important to follow the manufacturer maintenance guidance here, and I took out of our wet separators that we utilize for our machine here the maintenance, let's say, manual. And it's really what I really want to emphasize here: do the same and take these information that you need, or these steps that you need to do before you operate the wet separators at the beginning and at the end of the day into a simple checklist, post it at your wet separator, and make sure that your operators are doing that. These machines can, if they are not treated very well, they can pose a significant fire risk to your operation. Administrative controls that we can do are pretty much, I would say, on 3 areas that you can emphasize. First of all, have a good change management. That means when you're operating your machine and you want to change the material, or you have a new employee which is operating a machine, or you get a new machine, a larger one, and you have experience from the same manufacturer with a smaller system, do a good change management here, understand where's the gap, what's needed to do the next step, what's needed to get the new employee being productive and working safe. The second point is also based, I come a little bit deeper on that, on air sampling and monitoring. It makes sense under certain circumstances and also based on some jurisdictions to do that frequently or even constantly. Understand how much powder maybe can in your air, in your environment or not. And do audits or Gemba walks or whatever we want to call that. Go out there, talk to your operators, understand that what you thought you should do is done, and also that what your manufacturer of your additive manufacturing machine, of your vacuum cleaner, or whatever, is also done in a way. As I said, I want to go a little bit deeper in air monitoring because this is a very sensitive topic. As I already said, the powders, either based on their chemical properties and also on their physical properties, like the grain size, they can be considered as harmful substances. In the worst case, in normal cases, at least they are respiratory powders that also can create some diseases there. So therefore, air monitoring is something which is very important. Also there, when you do that, you can do it by yourself, but this is very challenging because you have to meet a lot of, let's say, regulatory requirements and technical standards, how to do the sampling properly, what machines do you use, or what equipment do you use, who is allowed to do so, do you need for sampling a specific training, etc. This can be very challenging. So usually you contract this out to a specific industrial hygienist company. The other thing what you need to understand is what's in your alloys that you print. Okay, so you can always count the particles, but as I already said, the toxicity of the material itself is key to understand. And therefore, here is one example of a measurement campaign, and they did anything. So it's a typically Inconel alloy, I think what it was there. And they did some measurements, and what they found out is pretty much anything looks fine, but on cobalt and nickel, they see some exceedances. And then the next point is, if you see that from the pure quantitative point of view, you also want to understand it from a qualitative point of view. It means, when does these exceedance happen? It's not during the normal printing job, but here's an example from that measurement campaign. It was really when the persons were taking out the print jobs of the machine, then there was some fume generation. And along the whole process, there was also some post-processing with dust extraction. There was also the process that created some limit thresholds, exceedances here. Also here, work with regulators and with industrial hygienists, technical experts that can help you to understand that and tweak with you your IMPs, so your infrastructure, machine, and your process. Hygiene is very important, and good housekeeping. I cannot say that more. So therefore, have very good daily cleaning plans for your facility, how the floors and the surfaces are clean. Not only the floors, also the surfaces, because powder can go airborne and then they stick somewhere. Also, the daily machine maintenance is important, and also the cleaning. Also, consider the individual health hygiene practices. That means the proper use of PPE, and also train how to do that. Tell people that they should wash their hands. Don't have food or beverages in your additive manufacturing environment. It would be a not very nice scenario if people really ingest all these powders. That can maybe also trigger some biomonitoring requirements in some jurisdictions. And think about the proper storage, okay? Not always the proper storage is next to the machine. It can be somewhere else. Like here. So you see here examples from my site where I'm sitting. So we have specific dedicated storage facilities for the powders. When we don't use them anymore, we take them out of our production area, and we have specific shelves in specific rooms with ventilation, ESD floors, fireproof walls, etc. And you see a dry sprinkler system that can be actuated from the fire department if they want to sprinkler it. Yeah, the last part, also a little bit more, is about personal protective equipment. For you, it's important to understand what you need, one point of view, and secondly, that there can be differences, okay? So if you're operating a site in Germany, as an example, and a site in the US, respiratory protection can be a little bit challenging since the US standards are slightly different when it comes to particle filter sizes rather than in Germany. So therefore, if you want to have the same level of protection, you maybe have different requirements from different areas and different countries here. Also then, not just assessing, not just applying PPE, also understanding the specific tasks is important. So here's an example that we typically also share with you. When it comes to specific hazards, when we do things, as an example, change the white plate, what is the potential exposure to powder? Is it low, high, or medium? How long are you doing that? What specific PPE you're using it? And where are you doing this task in your machine? In this case, a glove box, down to very high potential exposure, like putting new powder in the machine. Okay, so that can be there. Also there, understand what are you doing, what's the risk, what's the hazard there, how often are you doing that, and then apply the correct PPE for your employees. To make life a little bit easier, because it can be very challenging, so you have maybe different materials in place, different substances. It can be also the case that you have some need to understand who needs to apply something like that. Because when you change the powder in the machine, you apply a very high standard for your PPE, because you then have a full cover, as example here, a full face mask, overall, coverall, fire retardant gloves, ESD wristbands, etc. But when you just move it around in a bottle or something like that, it's okay that you have a standard or basic PPE. So therefore, have a good understanding what is your PPE matrix for your site, and communicate it to your employees that they know to understand when to wear the full PPE and what not. Last point of here is additive manufacturing machines are pretty interesting machines. You maybe have visitors from coming to your site, taking a look how the things are printing. It's very exciting. Think also about them. Okay, so if you have somebody working with a full cover protection and next to them there is guest, visitor, investor, whatever, standing without any protection, that's not good. Okay, that's not helping at all. Yeah, here from the occupational health and safety part, also some key takeaways. Operators that that work day by day with these materials have a potential exposure scenario there, which needs to be considered. Think about the right PPE that you use for your operation and what type of activities do you have there. Housekeeping is key. So it's more key than on every type of shop floor, but in this case, it's really key. And also good hygiene practices for your employees itself, so that they don't take the powder out of your production environment and take it home to their children or wherever. The combustibility of the materials and also the flammability risks is depending on the particle size mainly. Also here, you need to understand that. Be nice to your vacuum cleaner or wet separator. That really means maintain it very well. Then it helps you very well to get rid of the powders and dust that you don't want sitting at the outside or in your Bildschirm, etc. And know your waste, okay? Know what rules apply either to get rid of it, and also what rules and safety measures you need to handle the waste streams from the personal protective equipment, also from the process equipment. Yeah, I'm pretty much at the end of my presentation. I'm thankful for the time with you. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer so.
Okay, Willie, thank you. I'm going to start you out with a real general question. You've kind of addressed it, but if you want to just reiterate, during which activities can you expect increased exposure to powder? A
very good question. So the typically where you have the highest one, and if you maybe recall the little monitoring slide that I showed you, it's every time when you need to open up your machine and do something with your print job. So that means changing powders is something, but also sieving. And there are different ways how to sieve powder. There are either closed loop environments or machines that do that for you, and they do it pretty well from the powder scenario exposure. But there are also techniques where you sieve your powder by yourself. Then you do it, hopefully not in an open environment, maybe under a fume hood. But also there you see more powder exposure. And typically anything what has to do with post-processing. So removing supports, cutting your print jobs from the build plates. There can be some enclosures with residual powders inside there. Either you want it or it's not possible the other way. And that's scenarios where you typically see a lot of powder coming out of the process.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to test your knowledge of binder jetting, and we'll see how it goes. So aluminum for binder jetting, everybody knows aluminum is a reactive material. Can it be a reality for big serial production? What are the cost impact of having to counteract bigger HSE risks?
Oh my God! Since binder jetting is not a ready product that we sell, but it's something I would say very hot for us. The biggest health and safety risk that we foresee is pretty much around the curement and the treatment. So when you need to heat it up, you definitely generate volatile organic compounds, and you need to understand, and depending on if it's aluminum or ceramic or whatever, it's mainly depending on the solvent and on the, let's say, the resin that you use to stick it together. So, but this is all solvable, okay? So we have in other industries a lot of resin curing, and on a large scale base. So there are ways how to treat it. How to treat is environmental friendly. So yeah, it's a topic, but it's a solvable topic.
Okay, thank you. How can we determine the correct waste classification for waste powder?
Yeah, the correct waste classification for your waste powder is pretty much that what your local regulatory framework is giving you. Okay, so as I already said, in Europe, we take the European Waste Catalog, and therefore by the local German jurisdiction, as an example, you consult your waste vendor and you classify together with him the waste stream, and then you find the right way how to dispose it. As I said, in the US, it's a little bit different. So you have there the classification of the material itself. Also there, you typically consult somebody who is taking measurements and gives you the right classification. And as I said, it's a task that you do in collaboration with your waste vendor and experts.
Okay. So another question is, do we need an electrostatic safety discharge floor coating?
Yeah, we recommend to have that everywhere where you handle reactive powder, okay, that can create a combustible risk, that you minimize any static discharge and also opportunity for any electrostatic discharge, and any risk that you maybe create a combustible atmosphere or combustible scenario. You can do this with Esd mats. So these are plastic mats. They are standard equipment that you roll on the floor. But if you have larger facilities like storage facilities, it maybe makes sense to put Esd surface coating there, or laboratory environments as well. Then it makes sense to do it, because then it's more cost effective, and also from the maintenance piece of view, it's easier to do so.
Okay, thank you. We have another question about powder and pouring powders. Is it considered a high-risk activity for inhalation?
It also depends here on the environment. So if you are doing that in open space without any control, I would say, without any ventilation, not with a fume hood, then it is a very high risk. And also then it depends on how you rinse the powder, so what's the level way down there. These powders then can go very easily airborne. The good thing is these are metal powders, so they are per se have a little bit heavier than the standard dust that is around here. So they tend not to go very easily airborne, and then they start to fly. So you typically have, as an example, we did a drop test, I think a couple of years ago. We take a mug of aluminum powder and let drop it from 1 meter, and then we figured out what is the surrounding around of that. And we figured out that the most concentration you have in the area around 2 meters around this scenario. And beyond 4 meters, you don't see any powder contamination anymore. So the stuff really goes airborne, and then it falls very quickly around of that. So if you don't do that, yeah, you can definitely use it with the particle size. It's something that's an inhalation risk, and you need to consider it. So therefore, that's the reason why we put everything under fume hoods or in closed loops.
Okay, I think we probably have time for one more question so we can stay on time. Last question is, do you ever see condensate in recirculated powder?
We did some analysis, and it depends a little bit on the machine itself and also on the material used. To be honest, in the last time, we haven't seen much condensate left in the powders. I think there are older machines outside there where you can still have some condensate in the powders, but this is it depends really pretty much on your machine and on the process and the material that you use, because some materials produce more condensate than others, and you can fight that when you're adding more process gases, etc. So we typically don't want condensate into the powder. Okay, it can be, but it's not really. We don't have much issues about that.
Okay, great. We have 2 minutes, so I'm going to do one more question, and then we'll sign off. But what should be done regarding static control? Is there a humidity level that should be controlled?
When you take our machines, we have what we call pre-installation requirements, and the humidity levels are given also there. They are more around, let's say, process stability. So within the range of this humidity, we can guarantee with the design process parameters and the material and the print jobs that you want to have that it will work. If you go beyond these humidity levels, it can be that the process itself can be a little bit challenging. Okay, so that is the reason from the humidity point of view. From the static discharge point of view, you need very high humidity levels. Okay, so it really must then the case that you have so high humidity levels that the water starts condensating on cooler parts of the machine, like the chiller systems, etc. And then it's not a ESD problem itself, because inside of the laser printing machines, all the tubings, all the everything what has to do with the process is thoroughly grounded and absolutely insured. Then it's not a process of static discharge. Then it becomes a process of the overall stability of the machine.
Okay, thank you. And that pretty much takes us to the end. And as we wrap up our time here, I want to thank all of the attendees for joining us. This webinar will be available on demand if you'd like to listen to it again, or perhaps pass it along to a friend or a colleague, so anyone who would be interested. I also encourage you to register for upcoming webinars, and we've been hosting regular webinars on a variety of topics for, probably 1.5 years now. So take a look at our pre-recorded webinars on our website. We have a variety of different additive topics on there. And finally, before you log off, we ask that you please complete a short survey that will pop up for you. and share us how your experience was today, and let us know any other topics you'd like to hear about in the future. And we look forward to seeing you all next time for our Webinar Wednesday series. Thank you. Thanks, Willie.
Thank you. Bye.